Hey everybody, just wrapped up once again the biggest interview of my entire life with number 45 in his own building, President Trump. Talk a lot about the Afghan withdrawal, talk a lot about China, talk a lot about what's wrong with the country. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with everyone you know. Much love from SRS. Enjoy the show. Mr. President Trump, it's an honor to be here in Vegas.
My honor.
To interview you. And so you need no introduction, but I'm here as a U.S. veteran. I served in SEAL teams and as a CIA contractor, and I just want to talk to you about some of the most concerning topics when it comes to the combat veteran population.
Good.
And so I'd like to start with some rhetoric that's been in the news lately. I don't believe it. And there's been multiple times where the media has misconstrued some of the things that you say about veterans. The latest being supposedly you calling wounded veterans that have been shot or wounded suckers and losers.
Yeah. A made-up story. It was made up by a magazine. And I think it was The Atlantic, which is a radical left magazine. And as soon as I heard it, I said, that's a terrible thing, and you don't get rid of it. You know, they make these things and they just use it and use it. The opposing side, they know it's false. I had 26 people that said it never happened. Who would say it? Who would say it? Nobody would say it. A stupid person or a person that's mentally ill. And, you know, as you know better than anybody, I rebuilt our military. We gave 86 billion, 85 billion of it away to Afghanistan so stupidly, but far bigger than even that. I rebuilt our military. I had the best relationship with the military of any president and respect the military more than anybody. And they just made up this horrible quote. I was in this massive rainstorm, massive, and I was supposed to take helicopters to a certain place in Paris. A little complicated. I don't want to be too complicated. And the helicopters weren't able to fly. They were military helicopters, our helicopters. And I looked at it, I said, I'm not going to be able to fly. So I wanted to drive. By the time we realized we had to drive, it was very late. And everybody talked me out of going. And all of a sudden, and it was a mistake, I wanted to go. And somebody made up the story that I said that. And I have so many witnesses. I have one of them in this room right now. He's a witness that I never said it. Nobody would say that. And I went to one the following day in a big cemetery. But they said I said about soldiers, I think it was World War I soldiers, they're suckers and losers, and they're in graves. Think of it. They gave their life for our country. This was in Paris. It was an American cemetery. And they said that, and this was somebody that actually, he didn't say it, they made it up with a magazine. You know, they make things up. They don't even have sources. They make things up out of thin blue like a storyteller. And I wanted you to ask me this question because I think it's a terrible, terrible thing. But they make up stories. And then one guy who's a very, sort of a low-life guy, he is a low-life, they got one confirmation. And 26 people said it never happened. But the one confirmation was a guy that I fired, a terrible, stupid person, actually, that couldn't do the job well. And I fired him. And he sort of confirmed it. I don't know how he confirmed it, but he did. And it's a totally false story. Nobody would say that. And I would say this to military people. I'm the president of the United States. I say suckers and losers. They gave their life. And it's just a disgraceful story, Sean. And all I do is deny it. We have so many witnesses. And I said, you know, that's one of those questions where no matter how you answer it, you lose. Do you understand that?
I do.
I can sit here and talk about it for another 20 minutes. And at the end, people would say, even if they have a doubt, you've lost. Just a little doubt. They only need a 2% doubt. And I would think that if people heard that, I think if I heard that, maybe I'd believe it if I was in the military. You know, what do they know? They're sitting there and they heard the story put out by this real rag that's failing badly, losing a lot of money. And, you know, it's interesting. I was doing a rally and I was walking past press and some guy shouted to me, I think from that magazine, "Is it true you called them suckers and losers?" Who? They said, "Military in the graves." I said, now that's a loser. Because as soon as I heard it, I said that you can't respond to it because no matter how vigorously you deny it, people, I mean, they have an expression for it. I won't use the expression, but it's a bad expression. It's when they ask you a question that no matter how you answer it, it leaves a telltale stain. And it's a shame that they can get away with it. And we have libel laws now where you can do anything. You can sue. You can spend $25 million suing people, and they laugh at you. It's a disgrace. Shouldn't be allowed, but it is allowed.
Since we're on a long-form podcast and we're not going to take anything out of context,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would like the veteran population to know about what you think of them?
That I love them, that I respect them, that I rebuilt our military, that I got budgets that nobody's ever gotten, that I increased their pay because of the respect I have. Now, if you take a look at what's happening with the military, it's horrible. Under Biden / this woman is she's a communist, I guess. I mean, and I look at action. I don't look at words. Defund the police. She was the head of defund the police. Now all of a sudden she wants to, you know, deny it. She was on the border. She was the border czar, and millions of people poured into our country, and they're from prisons and they're from jails. They're from mental institutions and insane asylums. They're all different, you know. It's like that's the mental institution on steroids, as you know. And they're from and they're terrorists, and they're from jails though in many countries. Recently, they came in from the Congo in Africa. Where do you come from? I think 22 people, but many more than that. They're emptying their jails into our country. They say, "Where do you come from?" The Congo. We're in the Congo jail. What did you do? They wouldn't answer. We have the toughest people in the world being dropped into our country, and not from just South America. From South America, yes. Venezuela, their crime rate's down 72%. Their prison population is way down. Their mental institution population is way down. And this is true with many countries.
And that's because they're
all
using
us as a dumping ground. They're dumping their prisoners. They're dumping their gang members, MS-13. They're dumping everybody into our country. We have a totally open border. And she's a Marxist. She's really a Marxist. Her father is a Marxist professor. This woman ran against, I guess, about 22 Democrats. She was the first to leave the race. She left the race before she even got to Iowa, the first primary state, as you know. And a lot of people followed. And Biden, which is shocking because he's terrible, and terrible for the military, by the way, but he's the worst president in the history of our country, in my opinion. And yet what happened to him shouldn't happen. He got 14 million votes. She got no votes. It was a coup. It was an overthrow of a president. There's never been anything like that. That doesn't mean he's good or he's competent, but he did win. And then they said, "We don't want you." You know, we had a debate. And after the debate, he was 17 points down in polls. And they went to him and they said, "You're not going to win. You can't win. And we want to get somebody else." And he didn't want to go, and he fought it. And then they said, I think they were going to pull out the 25th Amendment, which is mental acuity or something. And he said, "I'll go." Now they're trying to act like it was friendly. It wasn't friendly. He's a bitter man right now. And he should be. What happened to him, you go through primaries, you win. I mean, he won against 22 people. Now, I think he got very lucky. Things happened. I understand exactly what happened, but he got lucky, but it doesn't matter. He won, getting 14, think of it. He got 14 million votes. She got none. She never made it to the first contest, which is Iowa. And now she's running. Okay, now I'm not complaining because she should be easy to beat. This country's not ready for a Marxist or a communist. This country's not ready for somebody that wants to defund the police. that said there will never be fracking in our country. If we don't frack, if we don't drill for oil and gas, we won't have a country, because that's where the power comes from. That's, we can talk about all sorts of things, but that's the power. That powers up our plants.
I'd like to talk about the power grid, but I'd like to start with one of the major concerns in the veteran community is the way that the Afghanistan withdrawal happened.
Terrible.
We had 13 service members killed, one missing an arm and his leg, $7.1 billion in equipment left behind. Allies in Afghanistan have been abandoned, people that we fought alongside with for 20 years. We left the intelligence at our bases that depict where they live, biometrics, everything. Taliban's hunting them down, killing them, raping their wives, raping their kids. We evacuated 120,000 plus Afghans that are unvetted. We have no idea where they're at in our country. And now we're sending them $40 to $87 million a week. It's so bad that I did an interview with Ahmad Massoud. He's the leader of the Afghan resistance.
Right.
We wanted to get in front of Congress to warn us about the oncoming threat that we're facing because we're funding the Taliban.
Yep.
We had made a petition. It now has almost 300,000 signatures. We got it to Representative McCall. He's done nothing, not one thing. Why do you think Congress doesn't want to see Massoud?
Well, I'm surprised when you say McCall is a good man. But I was so against that whole thing. Just so you know, I wanted to get out, but I wanted to get out with dignity and strength. I spoke to the head of the Taliban on numerous occasions because they were killing our soldiers. They were snipers, and they were killing our soldiers during Obama and a little bit during me at the beginning. And I heard about it. And I said, get the head of the Taliban. And the press went crazy when they heard I was speaking to him on a telephone. And I told him in a pretty tough way, but nice enough, don't do it. Abdul, his name is. Abdul, he's still there. He's still the head. And I said, don't do it. And he understood that. And in 18 months, not one person was killed. You know that during my time.
Yes.
Nobody would have been killed. Then we had a rigged election, and they took over, and it started. It started in a lot of places. Russia started to form along the border. Would have never happened if I was president. But and by the way, October 7th would have never happened in Israel because Iran was broke. They had no money to do anything. Now they have $300 billion. They made it all in the last 3.5 years. I said, anybody that buys from, I just wanted to have a deal with Iran. Very simple deal. Can't have a nuclear weapon. That's it. I want them to be happy. I want them to have great lives. I want them to have a great country. Can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. And I would have had that deal done within a week after the election, but the election was a disgrace to our country, another disgrace. But with Afghanistan, you had to get out, but we were going to get out with dignity and strength. We were going to take our people out, our Americans out. We have people living there, as you said, better than anybody could say it. When you said raping the wives, raping the people, I mean, I assume that could be happening. But can you imagine we didn't take them out? The military ran out first. It's almost like they ran. We didn't remember this. We didn't have one problem for 18 months with them. And the Taliban's rough. They're good fighters. They're ancient fighters in a way, their equipment and everything else, but they're good, very good fighters. But we had no problems. And then when this happened and when I was out, they heard that the military was gone. And I could just imagine somebody coming back and saying, Abdul, the Americans have left. The soldiers are gone. He probably said, you fool. Don't ever tell me that nobody could be so stupid. But Milley was a stupid person, very stupid. You know, we have great generals, but Milley was stupid. Guys like John Kelly are he's one of the dumbest people I've ever met. A bully, but a weak bully. And, you know, we just have some stupid people. Kelly wasn't so involved in that, but we have some really stupid people at the top. But a little bit lower down, the non-television generals are phenomenal. I took 100% of the ISIS caliphate. You know, I took out ISIS.
I do.
It was supposed to take 5 years. I did it in 3 weeks. And we have great generals and we have great military, and they're not woke, Sean. You know, the people that are woke are the top people. They should all get out. And I'll tell you another thing. I fired a lot of people when they don't do a good job. I fire them. I think it's important. Biden's never fired anybody. She's never fired anybody. Everybody involved in that horrible, most embarrassing day, you understand that. I think it's the most embarrassing day in the history of our country.
It's humiliating.
I think it told Putin, hey, I'm going to go in now. These guys are nothing. That's what it did. And it gave President Xi of China the right to fly bombers all over Taiwan, you know, which he's doing. I mean, it's just a question of time. Although if I get in, I think it's a different story. But it gave him the right to do things that he never did with me. He never was flying. The other day, they flew 38 bombers over Taiwan. They're surrounded by ships and everything. A lot of bad things are happening there. But whoever worked on Afghanistan should be fired. The generals should all be fired. That was the most incompetent thing. They left first, and they left Bagram. Bagram's one of the biggest air bases in the world. You probably know it. You're a military guy. And with the most powerful runways, like 9 feet thick, and, you know, just can handle the biggest loads of cargo and everything. But more importantly, it's 1 hour from where China makes its nuclear weapons, right? And we gave it up, just walked away, just left the lights on, walked away. They left the dogs too, by the way. You know, a lot of people say, what about the dogs? They had a lot of dogs there. The German Shepherd special dogs. Mm-hmm. They left them all. They left them all. Taliban doesn't like dogs, by the way.
Yeah.
But they left the dogs. They left the lights on, and they just fled. There was no reason to leave, but they did. We did want to get out, but I wanted to keep Bagram. And I was set to get out. It was enough already. I was going to take all the equipment. First of all, I was going to get the Americans out. Then I would have gotten some of the people that helped us, but you don't want to go crazy with that. And then, you know, the interpreters, et cetera, because they had some good people that are probably dead now. You know, the people that got on those planes, that was like survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
The toughest people got on the planes. And those tough people were enemies of ours in many cases.
Yes.
And they got on those planes. And many of the people got on those planes, but they didn't get inside. They were on the outside, and they fell off the plane at 3,000 feet, which is like 3 times the height of the Empire State Building. They fell off the plane. Those scenes of those planes taking off way up in the air, going at 400 miles an hour, and the people falling off the planes.
They won't show those anymore.
The whole thing was so horrible.
They won't show that footage anymore.
They don't show it. They don't. Oh, you're right. I never thought of it. You're right. And they never talk about it. You notice? They don't talk about that. They don't talk about the border. And just to bring you up to date, today it was learned that 818,000 jobs that they said were produced were not produced. They don't talk about that. Yesterday it was revealed, 2 days ago, it was revealed that Joe Biden and the family stole $27 million. Can you imagine if Trump stole $27 million or $2?
It would be everywhere.
They would have stopped everything. They would have stopped the Democrat convention. They'll say, let's make it next week. Biden, it was revealed by Congress, by committees in Congress, I think 3 committees, confirmed $27 million stolen by the family or something having to do with Biden. And you don't hear about that. I didn't see any stories about it. I saw a little piece on Fox, but outside of that, I didn't read one story about it. Can you imagine? They confirmed that $27 million, the night that he made the speech, which was a very nasty speech, the hatred he had for the people that overthrew him. It was an overthrow. It was a coup. He screams. Everything is, you know, he's like screaming all the time. It's like very uncomfortable. But I understand his screaming. He's got a disorder. But Nancy Pelosi and Barack Hussein Obama and a group of people went to him. They said, you either get out or we're going to wheel in the 25th Amendment.
What did you think when you got that news?
That he was leaving?
That he was leaving. Did you know he was going to leave?
Yeah,
there was a lot of speculation.
But I dealt with him. I mean, my primary contact with him was during the debate. And the debate was very early, if you remember, because he didn't even really have the nomination yet, or, you know, so I didn't care. I gave up everything. I said, they gave me a thing. They really didn't want to debate. They gave me CNN. They gave me Dana Bash. They gave me, who's, not exactly my best friend. And they gave me what I used to call fake Tapper, but I don't call them fake anymore because I thought they were very fair. Both of them were very fair during the debate. But they gave me two people that I would never take. They gave me a network that I would never take, a cable station, CNN. They said, we'd like you will both sit down. I said, look, let's stand up, okay? I was able, that's the only point I got. And they gave me all of these, they said there's no audience. I'd rather have an audience, but they say there's no audience. And they said, we're going to cut your mic off after your question. So they gave me everything. And they thought I'd reject it. I said, I'll take it. Because it was the only way I could debate him. And they were surprised I took it. But they sort of had to go forward with it. And we went forward. And I wouldn't say he performed brilliantly. This was not Winston Churchill. And he was very white. He wore very white makeup. I don't know what happened to him. I don't think his makeup artist did a great job, actually. I walked in, I said, man, is he white? But he didn't perform too well. And that's where it started with him. There was no chance of that happening before that.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't think he was exactly sharp. He wasn't the brightest bulb in the ceiling, as the expression goes, right? But that's when it started. And then he did a series of interviews to show that he's actually okay. And they were real set-up interviews. George Papadopoulos from ABC. ABC is the worst of the group, by the way. They're doing the debate. They were going to do the debate. I made a deal with Fox and ABC and also NBC. He's turned down Fox. He's turned down NBC. He'll only do ABC.
Interesting.
ABC is actually the worst of the group, believe it or not. The nastiest. If you're in my line of work, which can be a very dangerous line of work, by the way, I was telling the people at the border, they said, there are some people out there that are pretty rough on the border. And I said, I think so. But I said to them, it's actually very dangerous being the president. It's actually a pretty dangerous line of work, if you think. Just look at the number of people that didn't exactly make it. The proportion is very much higher than race car drivers, or by 15 times. But I said, it's a dangerous line of work, but you have to do it. And you have to do it properly. They were saying, are you sure you want to be here? I say, I have an obligation to be here. The border is a very unsafe place, and we have to straighten out the border. The border czar, who is this Kamala, never went to the border. She went to a border that you would take your family and have dinner there. This is the part of the border. That's not the part that's the problem. But she essentially never went to the border. She was the border czar. She was the worst border czar in the history of the world. There was never a border so bad as this one. Never.
I'd like to go to Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah.
That's a major concern of a lot of Americans. We've sent over $175 billion. We've seen no progress. And so I think a lot of people want to know, when you get into office, if you get into office, will you be able to sit Zelensky and Putin down and have them negotiate a deal so that we can spend the next $175 billion on our own infrastructure?
So let me tell you, two countries. Should have never happened, would have never, ever happened. And it didn't happen. For 4 years, there was no talk about Russia going in. And I knew Putin very well, got along with him actually great. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. By the way, people say, oh, he got along with the stupid press. They go, some of the stupid press. Some of the press is not stupid at all. But they say he got along with Putin. That's a terrible thing. He said, no, that's a good thing. He's got 1,800 nuclear weapons. So do we. And the biggest risk today, when I hear these poor fools talking about global warming, they don't call it that anymore. They call it climate change because, some parts of the planet are cooling and warming. It didn't work. So they finally got it right. They call it, they just call it climate change. They used to call it global warming. Years ago, they used to call it global cooling. In the 1920s, they thought the planet was going to freeze. Now they think the planet's going to burn up. And we're still waiting for the 12 years. We're down almost to the end of the 12-year period. You understand that, where these lunatics that know nothing, they weren't even good students at school. They didn't even study it. They said, we have 12 years to live. And people didn't have babies because they said, We only have another. No, it's so crazy. But the problem isn't the fact that the oceans in 500 years will raise a quarter of an inch. The problem is nuclear weapons. It's nuclear warming. The level of power of the nuclear weapon today, you take a look, go back many, many decades and look at Hiroshima, Nagasaki. That was so many years ago. And now you look at today and multiply that, what took place there, by 300 or 400 times. That's the problem. That's the biggest risk today. Now, with our country, the biggest risk is always that. But we also have some very bad people. You have crazy Nancy Pelosi and all these lunatics within our government. They're lunatics. And it's a real problem. But the biggest problem we have, and the world has, is weaponry. Weaponry of other kinds, too, not just nuclear. But nuclear weapons are so massive and so powerful and so destructive. And these poor fools talk about global warming all the time. The planet's going to global warm to a point where the oceans will rise an eighth of an inch in 355 years. They have no idea what's going to happen to weather. And in the meantime, we're spending our wealth on this foolish stuff. We have people, Sean, with nuclear capability now. You have 5 countries with nuclear capability that is so devastating, it would be obliteration.
What would you like to see happen with Russia-Ukraine? How would you like to see that deal go down?
So it would have never happened. It didn't happen. A lot of people say, well, how do we know? Actually, Democrats even say that wouldn't have happened. October 7th, Israel wouldn't have happened. But what I've told people, I know Putin very well. I told him, don't do it. It was the apple of his eye. We would talk a lot. And Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I said, don't do it, don't do it. I won't go exactly what I said in terms of why you can't do it, but you can't do it. And he wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have done it anyway. But when he saw Afghanistan, I think that's when he really said, this is a time that he can go in. And I was out. By this time, I was out. But when he saw Afghanistan, I think that changed his whole thinking toward us. He lost respect for the United States. He also has no respect for Biden. Who does? So Putin went in. Zelensky was involved in the impeachment hoax number 1. There was a hoax, a couple of hoaxes, which I won both of them. But he was very honorable. I made a very innocent phone call to him to congratulate him on his victory. One of the people that worked for me, not the brightest one, kept asking me to call Zelensky. Call Zelensky. Oh, please call him and congratulate him, because they wanted to do an oil deal or something. I said, call him, and for the United States. And call him and congratulate him. Kept asking me. Yes, finally I called him. And they took that call, which was a congratulatory call, and they made it into an impeachment, and I will say I got great support from the Republicans. The Republicans were with me in Congress. I think I got 196 out of 196 votes. When did you ever hear that about the Republicans, right? I had great support. Jim Jordan and all these guys that were great. And in the Senate, I had great support too. So it was wiped out easily. But I got to know Zelensky then because they asked him at a news conference or something, did President Trump say anything that was threatening to you or bad? This was the reason you got impeached. Can you believe this? And he said, not at all. He was a gentleman. He called me to congratulate me. He said it was a very normal call. Now, he could have grandstanded. I respect him for what he did. He could have said, oh, yeah, I felt very threatened and all that. Just the opposite. He said nothing. He did nothing wrong. And that sort of ended it all. But he was very honorable. I know other people might have done something that could have been different. Now, it also changed because, by luck, the phone call was taped. And it was a perfect call. And they had already started the impeachment process. And when crazy Nancy Pelosi saw the phone call, which was 2 great stenographers, military stenographers, every word was perfect, right? Very professional. Every word was exactly my conversation is. It was perfect. Congratulations. I actually said, if you find any corruption in your country, please report it to the Attorney General of the United States, which they have to do. You know, we had an agreement with them because Ukraine has been traditionally a very corrupt country. I said, if you find any corruption, please report it to the Attorney General. And what's better than that? And basically, I congratulated him on his victory. But when he went, and by the way, when they saw that the call was essentially recorded, they died. Mm-hmm. They said, how can Nancy Pelosi looked at this idiot Schiff and said, how can you get us to do this? You know, Shifty Schiff is the one that sort of led the charge. He made up all sorts of things. You know, many of them made up statements about the call, and it turned out to be totally wrong because when they saw the taped call, the statements were total fraud. But because they're in that building, you're not allowed to sue them for fraud. Anyway, and I tell you, Zelensky was, he was 100% good. So and I've said this before, Sean, I will have that war settled when I'm president-elect, meaning before I get to office on January 20th. Many more people have died in that war than is being reported. I think you know that. You're a pro at the whole thing. You get it. You know, you're a skeptic. You almost have to be a skeptic, especially when you see all the lies. But that war is much more devastating than people understand. And people freeze to death in the winter. You know, Russia's a great winter fighter. They won. They beat Germany and they beat Napoleon. They're not easy to beat.
Yeah.
And they're a massive military. And Ukraine isn't. But Ukraine has us giving them a lot of money. One of the things that's unfair is that you mentioned 170 or so, but I think we're into 250 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And Europe is probably at 75 or 80. And I said, they have to equalize. Why are you not? It's much more important for Europe than it is for us. We have an ocean separating us, right? Whereas Russia is right at their doorstep. And Ukraine has always been like sort of a guardrail. It was to Russia. Russia's always been a little difficult, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's Russia or Soviet Union for a while, et cetera. But the problem you have, and the thing that most irks me, is all you have to do is say, you got to catch us. You know, Europe, if you add up the countries, is essentially the same size as the United States. Because of certain things I did, we're actually now bigger, but the economy is relatively the same. You know, you add up all the European countries and compare it. And they should have paid at least $150 billion more than they've paid. We're way ahead of them. And I say they have to equalize. But I will get that war settled. It would have never began. It's so devastating. Many more people, when you're going to see the end result, just like they lied about jobs today, where the 818,000 jobs were fake. They did that to look good, so, you know, before an election. That wasn't supposed to come out. That was supposed to come out after the election, and they had a leaker somewhere in the statistical department and in Department of Labor.
What would you have invested that $175 billion into our infrastructure? Would you have maybe put it into the power grid?
Well, your power grid, we have everything. I mean, we also have $36 trillion in debt. You know, we're doing all of this. You know, when I rebuilt the military, I came in, and you probably remember this. I thought it was terrible. We had no ammunition. Did you know that?
I did.
We had no ammunition. Our ammunition stock was empty because we had given it to all these people that we defend and that hate us. And I came in, and just before I got there, there were people saying in our military that we have no ammunition. I said, who are these stupid people that would say that anyway? Why would you say that? Why would somebody say we have no ammunition? It's terrible. Even if it's true, you don't want to say it. Mm-hmm. And we had no ammunition. Over the first year, first thing I did was fill up every storage house with, you know, we had these empty storage houses. They were packed to the gills. And then these guys gave most of it, to almost all of it. Now we have no ammunition again, by the way. These guys gave the ammunition to Ukraine. They gave it massive amounts of missiles and bullets and everything. We gave it to Ukraine. So I would say this, Ukraine in a lot of ways is very brave, but if we didn't help them, they would have lost in the first week. And we did help them. Europe helped them also, but they should have done much more. And I say this, if we ever, with NATO, as you remember, when I first came in, at the time we had 28 countries, and only 7 of them were paid up. The rest of them were delinquent. They owed the money, huge amounts of money. And Obama would go there, he'd make a speech and he'd leave. Bush went, made a speech and he left. I went, looked at the books and I said, you guys, you haven't paid. You got to pay. And I went back the next time and I said, you got to pay. If you don't pay, and they said, well, if we don't pay, one of the presidents of one of the countries said, if we don't pay, will the United States defend us against Russia in case of a war? I said, no, we won't even think. You mean you're delinquent? If you're delinquent, we are not going to defend you if you're delinquent. As soon as I said that, the money came in by the billions. I got $400 billion. These guys would never pay. They would have never paid. Why should they pay if we were
so
paying? So
that's all it took was you saying we're not going to back them if Russia
had I not
invades,
said that?
And they paid.
Yeah, had I said we will back you, they would not have paid, yeah.
Join me and my special guest for the next behind-the-scenes experience exclusively available on Vigilance Elite Patreon. The behind-the-scenes footage is raw and uncut. This is as close to the set as you can possibly get. You can expect anything from off-topic conversations, studio tours, the final moments before the interview starts, and everything in between. The behind-the-scenes content is constantly evolving and will continue to bring you more as we grow. You can gain access for just $15 a month exclusively at Vigilance Elite Patreon. I know everybody out there has to be just as frustrated as I am when it comes to the BS and the rhetoric that the mainstream media continuously tries to force feed us. And I also know how frustrating it can be to try to find some type of a reliable news source. It's getting really hard to find the truth and what's going on in the country and in the world. And so one thing we've done here at Sean Ryan Show is we are developing our newsletter. And the first contributor to the newsletter that we have is a woman, former CIA targeter. Some of you may know her as Sarah Adams, call sign Superbad. She's made 2 different appearances here on the Sean Ryan Show. And some of the stuff that she has uncovered and broke on this show is just absolutely mind-blowing. And so I've asked her if she would contribute to the newsletter and give us a weekly intelligence brief. So it's going to be all things terrorists, how terrorists are coming up through the southern border, how they're entering the country, how they're traveling, what these different terrorist organizations throughout the world are up to. And here's the best part, the newsletter is actually free. We're not going to spam you. It's about 1 newsletter a week, maybe 2 if we release 2 shows. The only other thing that's going to be in there besides the intel brief is if we have a new product or something like that. But like I said, it's a free CIA intelligence brief. Sign up, links in the description or in the comments. We'll see you in the newsletter.
How many are delinquent now?
And I took a lot of heat from the press for that because they said, President Trump wants to get out of NATO. Look, NATO is very unfair to us because we spend far more than we should be spending on NATO. These other countries, which many of them are very rich, they don't spend. It's a very unfair thing. NATO, for us, is a very unfair thing. But the worst part is Europe to us on trade is horrible. They don't take our farm products. They don't take our cars. I said to Angela Merkel, Angela, how many Chevrolets do you have in the middle of Germany? She said, none. I said, that's right. How many do you have in Munich? She said, none. I said, that's right. You know how many Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, and Volkswagens? We have millions. I said, it's going to have to change. they take advantage of us on trade, not quite like China, but not that far off. We lose $250 billion a year with Europe, trading with Europe. So we defend them because the NATO deal was so bad, but I made it much better, and I got them to pay. And 2% is too little, by the way, also. That 2% is not the right number. But I got them to pay, so we defend them, a very bad deal for us. We were paying, before I got there, I say we were paying 90% of the cost of NATO.
90%?
Yes, and I hate to use this word because you have some young, brilliant future soldiers watching, but they screw us on trade. So they screw us on trade, and we're defending them. It's always a one-way street. When I came in, we had such bad trade deals with South Korea, with Japan. Abe was great, by the way. He's a great man. He got assassinated. But we had such bad trade deals with so many countries. China. I made a great trade deal with China. They have to buy $50 billion a year of our product. But I don't even talk about it because when COVID came in, it was such a bad, I had a great relationship with President Xi, and I will again. And I don't see, a lot of people think, oh, you have to be tough with this. We have so many advantages, but we're not going to have the advantages long if we don't get smart, because our country's going bad, and now we have really stupid people running our country.
Can you
Biden
talk
is a
about
stupid person.
What
He
are
was
some of
stupid
those
25
advantages?
years ago, by the way. What?
What are some of those advantages that we have over China?
Well, we have economic advantages. We have very big, powerful companies. We have companies that were formed a long time ago when we had entrepreneurship was very important. Today, everybody wants to give everything away. I reduced taxes in our country. Largest tax cuts in history, largest regulation cuts in history. That's why I had the best jobs anybody. Then we had the bounce back after COVID. But we had, just prior to COVID coming in, we did better in the economy than the country's ever done, ever in its history, not even close. And we did a great job in COVID. I never got the credit. I always got credit for the military. I got credit, for ISIS and the Middle East and getting rid of some of the worst terrorists in the history of the world. You know that. But when I handed over, when you had that horrible election, which was a much better election, I did, again, much better in the second time than I did the first. But this time I think we're going to do better than both of them by far. I think there's more enthusiasm because they see how stupid they are. They didn't know that till last time because I was running the country. And what happened is now they see the incompetence, open borders. We don't know each other, but I look at you. Can you imagine somebody say, we want open borders so the entire world can release their prisoners into our country?
Why are they allowing that?
Because Biden and Kamala and all of these people, they want it. I call her, I have different names, it's very interesting, very, very interesting. But there are so many names you can call her. But the most important name is she's a Marxist. That's her ideology. She wants to destroy our country.
Are they doing this for the vote? Is that what they're trying to do?
She's the greatest flip-flopper in history. Every single thing. I'd almost rather have somebody just stick with what they, where they come from, okay? Every single thing that she believed in her whole life. Defund the police. She was a defender, big defender. She was somebody that bailed out all the people that destroyed Minnesota and Minneapolis during the riots. She literally raised money to get these absolute thugs out of jail. And this is a woman, think of it, defund the police. When you're a defender of the police, that's about maximum, okay? Mm-hmm. Then you don't get worse. But no drilling of oil of any kind. That means Pennsylvania goes bankrupt because Pennsylvania is the biggest, just about the biggest fracker. And it's a big percentage of their economic wealth and their employment. It's about 500,000 people. Pennsylvania, I can't imagine anybody from Pennsylvania voting for this person. But this is a person that shouldn't have been there. She tried to get there. She failed, and then she got there. It's the craziest thing. And I think she's going to fail because this country is not ready. for a Marxist. I call her comrade because she's, that's a connotation. But this country is not ready for a Marxist as a president or a communist as a president. She may have gone into that. She skipped the socialist, that was skipped over. She's beyond that. And we're not ready for that, Sean.
Let's talk about the assassination attempt on your life.
Yeah.
There was another one I saw today.
Well, it didn't.
Potential.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same thing. They had somebody that they took in today, but that wasn't a bullet going at 4,000 miles an hour at you. That was.
Where is this coming from? I mean, we look at the context. There's a lot of speculation about this, but if you look at context, the media has been against you. Then there was Russiagate. Then there was the impeachment. Then they kicked you off all of your social media platforms. They prosecuted you. And the latest was there was an assassination attempt. Was this really a lone wolf?
In history, if you study history, which you do probably more so than I do, they say Andrew Jackson was a president that was the most tormented as a president. They really went after him. Second was Abraham Lincoln, but he had the Civil War, so you would maybe expect that. And now people are saying, but nobody's close. Think of it. I won, but they impeached me twice. That's crazy Nancy Pelosi. She's no good, bad, so bad for the country. And an evil person, a sick person. I think she's a very sick person. But that whole... there's a large portion of the Democrats, like Adam Shifty Schiff. He'll probably be a senator soon. And he's just a bad guy. He's a bad guy. Made up stories. There are a lot of bad people over there. And I think I can say that there's never been a president treated like this. Now, the reason I'm being treated like this is I want a strong military. I want a border. I want things that you would like. I want low taxes. I want great jobs. I want to make America great again. All of these things. Nobody cares about Biden. Nobody cares about Bush. Nobody cares about a lot of other people. I rebuilt our military. I cut regulations more than anybody in history. I'm against destroying our country based on environmental things that are not true. They're just not true. They want to destroy our country. They're called environmental extremists. And I don't know if they actually believe it. It's interesting. They don't want us to produce any energy, they want our country to go to hell. And yet China's building a coal plant every single week. And coal is okay. They actually have methods now where coal becomes clean coal, all right? But think of it. Through the air currents, we can have the cleanest country. They can give up everything. They can give up the cows, which they'd like to. The cows they want to give up. No more meat. They don't want cows. They don't want cattle. Next will be humans, right? Mm-hmm. But they can give up the cows. They can give up they can do everything perfectly. But China won't. And that air, over a period of about 4 days, flows right over the United States.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? And John Kerry would go over there in his, privately owned airplane. His wife was a Heinz, married to Heinz, and she's wealthy, and they have a beautiful plane. And he'd fly over there and spewing whatever they spew. But he'd meet with President Xi, and he'd talk about the environment. And President Xi is a great player. He's a great poker player. And he was very nice to him. And, oh, yes, we are working very hard. We're not going to do anything, just words. But think of it. That flows, the garbage. The garbage flows down the Pacific into the Pacific. Do you know the garbage goes right along our West Coast and actually hits? We take tons and tons of garbage from China and other Asian countries out of the water. We don't talk to them about it. We don't charge them anything.
You had mentioned...
It's so unfair.
You had mentioned that China's producing a new coal plant, power plant every week. How are we going to, if you get in, He's also said that the race for AI, whoever achieves that, will achieve global domination.
Big deal, yeah.
How are we going to compete with China in the artificial intelligence space if we don't up our energy production?
If somebody like this Marxist gets in, I really don't believe it can happen. When she's exposed, I can't imagine. But if that happens, we're not going to be able to compete with anything. Oil, gas. You know, we were energy independent with me, first time in ever. And we're soon going to be energy dominant. We have more oil and gas. We have, I call it liquid gold, under our feet than any other country, more than Saudi Arabia. We have more than any other country, more than Russia. We were going to be energy dominant, but we were already energy. We didn't need anybody's energy. We didn't need our ships going through areas near the Arabic world where the ships get blown out of the water. We didn't need anything from anybody. We're energy independent. Nobody can believe it.
Will we get
but we're
back
going to
there?
be energy dominant. Think of it. But AI is important and other things are important. But AI, do you know that for AI, you will need more energy, electricity. What they need is electricity. That specific word. You will need more electricity than we have right now for everything. See the strip behind us, and this big building. Add it all up, everything in the United States, you'll need double the energy that we produce right now, just for that one industry, if we're going to be the big player and dominant. If we're not going to be the big player, then China's going to take over that industry very easily. And the problem is, so we have to produce massive electricity that we don't have. But the environmental impact statements won't allow us to do that. The rules and regulations that we currently have won't allow us to do any of it, not even a tiny fraction of it. But if I'm president, we'll be able to do it. And we'll do it through natural gas, which is clean. And we'll do it through primarily natural gas and nuclear. You know, nuclear now has become very good, very safe, and you build the smaller plants and you attach them. But nuclear is very powerful, very good. The wind doesn't work. It's very expensive, kills the birds, destroys everything around it. It's very, 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 very bad. It's the most expensive energy, wind. And then every 9 years, you have to replace the turbines. You know, they're made out of steel and they wear out. But we will create tremendous electricity for our company, for our country, and that will allow AI to compete. And you're right. Whoever gets that, it's going to be a big advantage. You know, that's going to be sort of the oil of the future. And we have to be the main player.
Would you, I read that Elon Musk said that he would accept a position in your cabinet. Would that have to do with artificial intelligence?
So
if
Elon
you chose
and I
him?
have a great relationship. He's great. He is a totally unusual character. Do you know Elon at all?
I don't.
He's great. And he's smart. And we have to cherish our geniuses. You know, we don't have too many of them, right? But he is a brilliant guy. And what he really would like to do is get involved in cutting some of the fat. And he does know how to do it. And he loves the country. You know, it's just an amazing thing. We had a conversation the other day. You would know better than me, but I hear it had hundreds of millions of people. I heard it had the biggest audience that there's ever been. I mean, would you say that's a correct statement?
I would absolutely say
There's
that's
never been
correct.
anything even close. I heard 750 million people. I mean, numbers that are crazy. And yeah, he wants to be involved. Now, look, he's running big businesses and all that, so he can't really, I don't think he'd be for cabinet. I'd put him in the cabinet, absolutely, but I don't know how he could do that with all the things he's got going. But he can sort of, as the expression goes, consult with the country and give you some very good ideas. Like on AI, there's nobody knows more about it than Elon. It's a big, big thing. And he said it's very important. I mean, it's very important for the country. If we don't do it, China's going to do it, or somebody else, but most likely China. And China is working right now to develop massive electricity, a flood of electricity, a massive flood of electricity. And we don't, because we have people that they're not even thinking about that.
Yeah.
And we have to win this election. This election November 5th will be the most important day, in my opinion, in the history of our country. Because if our country goes the wrong way with this election, I think this country is doomed.
What do you think your biggest challenge is with being elected?
Well, they've weaponized government. They've tried that one, and that drove me up, actually. It actually drove me, you've probably seen that, it drove me up. I don't know how many points, but it drove me considerably. But the people don't buy it, but they've weaponized government. We've never done that before. They're vicious people. These are vicious people. You know, I could have done that to Hillary Clinton. She was totally, what she did was so bad. She got a subpoena from the United States Congress and she destroyed everything. You go to jail for that for years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did it as a private person, you go to jail. But she destroyed everything. And I said, you know, wouldn't it be terrible? I had won the race. I said, wouldn't it be terrible to have the wife of the president of the United States, a former president of the United States, being put in prison? And I meant that. I think it would be terrible. And I could have pushed that very easily, and I did sort of the opposite. And now they come after me. I say, oh, isn't that nice? These are vicious people. They're vicious people. But they're not talented people other than in that way. In that way, they're talented. They're very talented on cheating in elections. They're very talented on, I say crime. I mean, really crime. But they're not talented in terms of policy. Like, we want to have strong borders. We want to have great elections. We want to have free and fair elections. We want to have incentives so these great companies don't move. You know, they're talking about doubling taxes because I gave the biggest tax cut in history. They now want to double and triple and quadruple and even terminate the taxes that I gave, the big tax cuts, which would lift taxes in this country 4 or 5 times. So people, and I mean middle income people, would be paying 4 or 5 times. They would be paying much more money. But what would happen then if they did that, John, is, you know, these are international companies. They may be based here now, but they're basically international companies. They'll leave the United States. They'll take their jobs. They'll go someplace else. Every company, you know, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies went to Ireland.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people didn't know that, but nice place, you know. But they went to Ireland because they were given these massive tax breaks. These companies can get up and they can go. And we'll lose these companies. They'll go. I mean, you can say, we're going to have you pay 50% tax and all this. I got it down from 49% down to 21%. And it was the greatest job boom anyone's ever seen. And interestingly, the tax rate was cut, and yet the country took in more revenue. Tax cut with a lower rate, we took in more revenue than we did when it was high because the incentive was so great. And I incentivized companies to bring the money back offshore, to bring the money. They had billions, trillions of dollars off, like $3.5 trillion. But there was no way to get it back. There was no mechanism, and the tax and the penalty was too high. And I reduced that, and I got Apple as an example, brought in $500 billion. The companies started bringing their money back into the United States, using it to build. But if you don't take care of these people, they're going to go to another country. They're international companies, and China wants them, and all of Europe wants them. And we can be the tough guy like this person that should not be really running for president. It's a very dangerous thing to have a person running for president with the views that she's got. You know, when you're a politician and you come out with something early, that's usually where you are. So she came out with all these different things, open borders, to fund the police. That's where her thinking is. That's where she is. That's how she grew up.
Mr.
And that's what she's going to end up doing.
We're running out of time, and I have 2 questions that I think are very important. One being, once again, the media construes what you say. Everything I read says that one of the biggest challenges in the upcoming election is going to be the women vote. I think a lot of people think that is because of the rhetoric that they're saying about your stance on abortion. So I'd like to get your stance on abortion, unfiltered, unedited, just raw.
So you have Roe v. Wade. For 52 years, it was in the federal government. And Democrat, Republican, nobody wanted it there. The great legal scholars, everybody wanted it out, and they wanted it to be back in the states. there wasn't discussions about 16 weeks and all the different discussions you hear. It was just, it had to be out. It had to be a states thing. And I'm for exceptions. Ronald Reagan was for exceptions, for the life of the mother, rape and incest. And most people now are for, most Republicans are for exceptions, the exception, in other words, the exception. And I was able to do something that nobody thought was possible, get it back to the states. And the states now have it, and people can make their own decisions within the states. This is where every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican wanted it. Roe v. Wade, you've heard this, was legally a very bad place to have it in the federal government for a lot of reasons. I got it out, 3 great justices that I put on voted, plus 3 other, in my opinion, great justices. And they got it out. And now it's in the states. And if you take a look at Ohio, recently voted in a very liberal fashion, I must tell you. Kansas voted in a very liberal fashion. But some will be more liberal and some will be perhaps more conservative, meaning. And you're going to have a thing that was ripping our country apart. Roe v. Wade was ripping our country apart. And it's now being settled at the state level. And a lot of people are praising it. A lot of great lawmakers are praising it. And it's working out. And states they're coming up with negotiations, and they're doing it. And there are a lot of reasons why this is the right way to do it. But Roe v. Wade was always considered to be something that just shouldn't be there in the federal government. And now it's all working out. If you look at what's happening and all of these votes that have been taken, and others are being taken. Florida is being voted on now. It's all happening. And it's very interesting. You're going to have something that was tearing our country apart for years. This is all they talked about, Roe v. Wade. And it's going to be done by the states. And that's what's happening right now. And basically the people are going to be voting on it. And that issue has become a much smaller issue since this has originally happened, when everyone said, oh, you're taking away the right to abortion. Okay. Now, as far as women are concerned, I think they like me. You know why they like me? Because I'm going to give them safety and security. I'm going to give them safety at the border. We're going to have a closed border. We had very few people. I had the record. I wish I had it. I have the graph, my all-time favorite graph, because this is when I turned over. When I turned over to say, let me see the graph, I turned over. This was a graph on immigration. But when I made that right turn, the bullet came and it whacked my ear. But it was only my ear. And it was a bloody mess, I never realized, they told me at the hospital, I said, why so much blood? They say when the ear gets hit, it's the bloodiest part of the body. I didn't know that. Because of cartilage. The doctor gave me a little lesson in medicine, which I don't know if I wanted a lesson at that particular time, but I was bleeding pretty badly. But I did say, why so much? And the ear, I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's, you get hit other places, you don't bleed as much. So, but I turned to the right to look at the chart. And if I didn't turn to the right, very strongly, you saw that, I was looking and went this way. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here.
What do you
But that
attribute
chart
that
showed
to?
the lowest, the best, numbers we've ever had in terms of illegal immigrants coming into our country. And by the way, I want people to come into our country. I want people, we need it for labor for a lot of reasons, but I want them to come in legally. I don't want to take the prisoners. I don't want to take gang members. I don't want to take people that are going to be nothing but trouble. But women, I believe, like me because they feel very strongly that I'm going to give them better security with the military, with the borders, with the police. I have the endorsement of almost every major police group in the United States right now.
I have one last question. I think that one of the biggest problems within the country is the distrust in the United States government. I'm one of them. I have zero trust in any government agencies. I have zero trust in our Congress and our Senate, anything. We have a government that's not functioning right now.
Yeah.
How are you going to gain the trust back of the American people within the government? And Are we going to see anybody held accountable?
Yeah. The answer is yes on the second. They're going to be held accountable. They've got to be held accountable. What they're doing, they're destroying this country. They're crooked people. They're dishonest people. They're going to be held accountable. But what I find is, so when I came to Washington, I won an election that everybody said, they thought I was just going to have some fun. Everyone said, he's got too good a life. I did. I had the greatest life. I went from that to having bullets shot at me, okay? I had the greatest life. And they said, would you do it again? I said, without question, because we're going to save the country. It's much more important than I had a good life. A lot of people have a good life. It's like not the same thing. We're going to make America great again. Literally, we're going to make America greater than ever before. If we don't do it this time, we'll never be able to do it. It'll be too late. It'll be too far gone. But we're going to have great people. When I came in originally, I didn't know anybody in Washington. I was only there 17 times. You may have heard me say this. I never stayed over. I built a hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, which was a great hotel and very successful, and then sold it. And then what happened is I didn't really know anybody in Washington. I was a New York person. I wasn't like a Washington, D.C. person. And all of a sudden I'm president and I'm driving down Pennsylvania Avenue with more police and motorcycles and military than I've ever seen before in my life. I said to my wife, do you believe this? I'm president. But I didn't know anybody in Washington. And I had to rely on people to give me names. And many were really good. I mean, Bob Lighthizer, I had great trade people. I had some great people. But I also picked people that, in retrospect, I wouldn't have picked. But now I know the smart ones, the dumb ones, the weak ones, the solid ones, the ones like you. I know the people. I know everybody, sort of like everybody. And we're going to have a great government. I didn't know. I had to rely on people I'd ask, I don't want to use names because I don't want to embarrass. They're not bad people, but I'd ask people that were rhinos, who do you recommend for such and such a position? All important positions. And they'd recommend some people that were rhinos or something, or weak or not good. And I don't have to ask too much right now. I know the people, and I've known them through fighting and wars. I've known them through, because all this stuff. I had great support. Don't forget, I beat Nancy Pelosi. I beat all these people, every one of them. And somebody said, if you look at it, he beat the Clinton family, right? And that was really Obama too, because he was behind her 100% like he was running. And I beat the Bush family. I beat everybody. And now I beat Biden. I got him out. I beat him twice, actually. I beat him the first time, but now I beat him a second time because it was the debate that got him out. And now I have to beat somebody that nobody ever heard of, who's a Marxist. And I think I'll be able to do that. But I know the people now. I've been in government now for 8 years. I was in government for no years. I mean, I became president and I said, I've never done this before. It's pretty, sort of a miracle. In the history of our country, we had 92% politicians become president and 8% generals. Not admirals, but generals, only generals. So those were the only two, politicians and generals. George Washington, Dwight Eisenhower. Actually, he was very good, very strong on the borders. Eisenhower was strong on the borders, a moderate guy, but very, very strong on the borders. He had big deportation. But 92% was politicians. And 8%, there was nobody else. And then I came along. And so people were surprised. But I know the system, I know the people, I know some great people, and I know some people that I wouldn't put in. But you learn that. And so now I'm a very experienced guy, and we're going to bring our country back. And we're respected. We're going to be respected again with other countries. Don't forget, I had no wars. Other than I defeated ISIS, but that war was already started. That war was raging for 20 years before I got there. And I ended that war in 3 or 4 weeks. So, a lot of people give me credit, even people that don't love me, as being a great president, because we did a lot. Right to try. I got right to try for people that are terminally ill, where they can use space-age medicines. We have the best labs and the best doctors in the world. But you couldn't use it because you just couldn't use it. You weren't allowed to use it. And I got that done where you can use these space age that won't be approved by the FDA for a long time, maybe 4 or 5 years. And I've saved thousands and thousands of lives. But now I know the system, and I know Washington, and I know the people. And I hope we win. And if we do win, we're going to make this country greater than ever before.
Well, Mr. President, it was an honor to interview you, and I really appreciate the time. And do you have any words of encouragement for the American people?
Well, I do. I just think the most important day, as I said, in the history of our country is November 5th. A lot of it's early voting and all of that. So, it's just another crazy thing where you vote for months ahead of schedule. The whole thing is crazy. But we want to go to same-day voting, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and paper ballots. It's very simple. And we want to have legitimate. We don't need computers in the sky. We got to bring our voting back. But I just say to the American people, get out and vote. And you're going to be really happy. We're going to be safe. We're going to be respected again. And you're going to be very happy.
I'd like to close out with one thing, and that's just my message. Not everybody votes, and not everybody's going to vote. So if you are a voter, grab a friend and drag them to the poll.
Great.
And make them vote.
That's right. People have to vote. It's very interesting. Some groups don't really vote very much. And yet they're great Americans, but something happens where they don't vote. They have to get out and vote. This is going to be the most important election in the history of our country, I believe.
I believe that too. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. It's
I'm
a great
behind
honor.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.